Making a video game is really hard. It's the ultimate balancing act. Not only are developers trying to manage all of the elements of filmmaking, but also throwing gameplay on top of that, and if any of these things are lacking, the whole project might suffer. Even the greatest minds in the industry need a team of dozens, if not hundreds of people. It takes a village. This, however, does not mean that a good game can't be produced by a small team. So that's why, first off, I want to congratulate the team of Mother 3 Opposing Force, who not only attempted one of the most challenging art forms to create for, but also actually completed their work, already putting them leagues ahead of the vast majority of major Mother fan projects, and doing so with only a team of 10, 15 if counting playtesters. I have nothing but respect for the artists who came together to make something they really care about, and I respect them to the point that I'm not just going to say good job and endlessly pat them on the back. This hack has major problems, and as someone who cares about this community and wants nothing more than for these creators to become better, I want to offer ways that they can do so. It's clear this team is very passionate about the Mother series, going as far as to reincorporate previously unused elements from the vanilla game and create other assets based on them, and they look great. What wasn't cool was the setup for this hack, which was annoying, and the README instructions were written without Macintosh users in mind. The installing of save files is one of the biggest annoyances throughout the game, especially considering many of these segments aren't longer than 5 to 10 minutes, leading the player to often spend more time installing the next part of the game than actually playing it. I know that it was said that this was due to how the game was programmed and it having to do with how the vanilla story is programmed, but Klaus's journey was able to alter the story without these problems, and yes, while that hack story was much more similarly structured to the original games, the developers could have attempted to use chapter transitions between segments instead of just 8 different save files. This system is a problem because it seeps into every other aspect of the game. Because segments are so short, the level up system is heavily de-emphasized, to the point where you will never see one of the Pigmask characters level up during normal gameplay. But despite this, the enemy layouts for each map are basically unchanged from Mother 3, with very few exceptions. With growing your character's strength being streamlined to being done exclusively through equipment upgrades you buy, there's very little reason to fight enemies at all, and the spawns should have been adjusted to reflect this. But they're left virtually identical, leading to the player constantly running from battles since for the most part there's no point to them, and results in them just being padding for a game that Breach is only about an hour in length anyway. There's a fun original piece of dialogue you get from the word on the wind when the masked man reaches a certain level, but the area is so short and fighting is so relegated to the backstage that I doubt most players will ever even see it. One of the biggest letdowns about the game is its lack of things to do. Maps are left to be virtually open world fields, but rarely go out of their way to include anything to do in them, and end up feeling empty or incomplete. If you're not going to include things to find in these large worlds, make them smaller. Put pigmasks with roadblocks at the entrances to untouched areas so players don't feel like they've wasted their time after spending several minutes exploring. In areas so expansive yet with only one objective, it comes across more like things weren't quite finished in this department rather than purposeful decisions in a game that's essentially intended to be additional world building. In a game that's meant as a small side story, having these large open areas doesn't complement the gameplay nor the storytelling. Other areas that are somewhat changed sadly leave a lot to be desired too though. The revisit to the factory with some custom enemies is neat, but again, since you're discouraged from fighting, you'll likely do little battling. And while it's a fun detail to include new enemies from the late game in Thunder Tower, it doesn't really change anything. It's just, they're here now. And while a nice touch, the compendium needs to be fixed. And seems to be kinda pointless at the moment, as there's so few original enemies to make even taking the time to observe the sprites here is worth it, and the hack being so short to begin with. A simple thing they could have done was change the contents of present boxes to be more helpful on Legs and Teppa's journey. A few are, but the majority have been left untouched, which leads the player to receiving items that are unhelpful to these characters, like the enemy bufferizer and magic butterflies. Speaking of the characters, they're one of my more favorite aspects of this hack. I was intrigued by these characters, but was sadly left just there. Rarely do either of them speak, though they're shown to do so, and are given little to no character. The entire hack doing surprisingly little with its characters despite being story-based. I just wish they were given more to do than just go from point A to point B and were given more time to interact with each other. I think the game could have greatly benefited from these characters being those two pigmasks that bicker constantly in the vanilla game, and having moments like this that could have made moments where they get along and work together more satisfying, tying the gameplay and story together. Moments like these could have been useful in the game's opening section, which was sorely lacking in excitement. There's some neat details, but Broadstroke is just a fetch quest that's unchanged from Mother 3 and even erases elements from the original game that were opportunities for new dialogue. There's too many enemies and the map is too big. This section honestly really highlights most of the major problems with the game. On a more basic level, objective flagging needs to be made more clear to the player. The maps are so big I often wasn't sure if I missed something important or not. I even accidentally completely skipped a boss because the game doesn't require you to fight it, which it should, as bosses were something largely lacking and could have made the ending to this section more gratifying. Objectives seem so simple throughout that I thought multiple times it can't be that easy and was left confused when it was. While the game could have used more bosses, the existing ones are pretty cool, as well as their battle themes. Ionia and the Chosen Four, where's Boney, have cool battle sprites that are lots of fun, and are some of the highlights of the entire game, though I can't help but feel as though they should have been switched or something. It just feels weird that the main characters in Mother 3 are just regulated to be mini-bosses more or less, and aren't even the section's ending fight. Not to mention you can run away from them, which feels weird. These battles, while fun spectacle, lack any real depth outside of survive. Aside from dialogue, the game would have benefited from more original cutscenes, as events just sort of start and stop without any real definitive beginnings or endings, and when there are, they're pretty underwhelming. Short cutscenes of the characters interacting with each other or some extra world building would have improved the narrative quality drastically in my opinion. This is especially clear during the first part of the ending, where you're instructed to pull the needle in Oso Castle, but are immediately told to go to the next save file, leading not only to an unsatisfying conclusion, but a pretty confusing moment for the player. The final area could have used some more. As of now, it's just really empty. I found Porky's ending monologue to be one of the highlights narratively, but was disappointed that the development team interrupted it for him to say, "That's it, the hack is over." It ruins the moment, and ends up completely ruining one of the highlights of the narrative. The screen should just fade to black here and then spawn you in the credits room, not interrupt the final major story beat to go, "That's all, folks." It's clearly not perfect, but I'm still glad it exists. Game design is not only a balancing act, but a juggling act, not just keeping all the elements working together, but to make sure each one gets an appropriate amount of attention. While sorely lacking in many areas, I wish this team nothing but the best and look forward to their next project and hope if anything they'll grow even a little bit. While being forms for expression, art is itself a learning process. Nobody hits bullseyes every time, even the so-called masters. If you'd like to try the hack for yourself, I've linked its page on Mother Forever in the description, and hope you enjoy it. Oh, and one more thing. The game needed more Teddy! Oh yeah, Teddy, baby.